37,000 feet above the black Atlantic, the captain's voice cracked through the speakers, not steady, not commanding, begging. If anyone on board has combat flight experience, please come forward. In seat 7, see a woman in a tailored blazer glanced sideways at the man across the aisle. Gray hoodie, messy hair, fingers resting near an unopened bag of pretzels, and let out a small, audible scoff. "Of course," she muttered loud enough for him to hear. "Some people sleep through anything." Ethan Brooks didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the seat back in front of him. Then he quietly unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. The woman's face changed. So did the flight attendant's. So did every face turned toward him. No one looked at him like a hero. They looked at him like a problem. And he hadn't even said a word yet. The flight from JFK to Heathrow had pushed back from the gate 3 hours late. And by the time Ethan Brooks settled into seat 8A and pulled his gray hoodie tighter around his shoulders, the cabin had already dimmed to the soft amber of overnight travel. He was tired. Not just from the delay, but from the kind of tired that came from holding a promise too tightly for too long. In the inside pocket of the hoodie against his ribs sat a steel watch. He had not worn it in 4 years. He carried it everywhere. His daughter had asked him about it once when she was 6. She had been digging through the laundry basket looking for a missing sock and had found the watch instead. "Why don't you wear it?" "Daddy," Lily had asked, and Ethan had answered the only way he could without lying. "Because Daddy already knows what time it is now. She was 8 now. Tonight she would be asleep in their narrow house in Seattle under the constellation lamp he had hung over her bed when she was 4. The neighbor across the duplex, Helen Parker, would be on the couch with her shoes off the way she always was when she stayed late. He had promised Lily he would be home by Friday evening. He had also promised 4 years ago that he would never again put himself anywhere that promise could break. He worked in aviation safety consulting now. He sat in conference rooms. He explained risk margins to executives who did not want to hear about risk margins. He had not flown a real aircraft in 4 years and had no intention of starting again. That was the point of the office. That was the point of this trip, a 2-day audit in London, a flight back, a Saturday pancake breakfast with Lily. He closed his eyes. The first sign of trouble was so small that later no one in the cabin would agree on when it began. A short shudder through the floor, the faintest delay before the engine steadied again. Ethan opened his eyes without moving. Out the window, the Atlantic was a black sheet with no stars on it. 90 seconds passed. Then the public address chimed, and Captain Reynolds's voice came through the speakers. It was not the voice that had welcomed them aboard 4 hours earlier. There was a hairline crack in it, like a glass that had been dropped, but not yet broken. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are dealing with a medical situation in the cockpit. If any passenger on board has military or commercial flight experience, please notify the nearest flight attendant immediately." The cabin did not gasp. It did the opposite. 195 people held their breath in the same instant, and for a moment, the only sound was the pressurized hiss of the air system. Then the second sentence sank in. In the cockpit. Not in the cabin. Not a sick passenger. In the cockpit, across the aisle in seat 7C, a woman in a tailored navy blazer, Diane Whitlock, returning to her firm's London office after a board meeting in Manhattan, set down her glass of red wine without drinking from it. She did not look frightened. She looked annoyed, the way people who travel often look annoyed when the world reminds them that travel is not in fact ordinary. Ethan kept his eyes forward. He heard the flight attendants moving before he saw them. The lead Claire Bennett came up the aisle from the rear galley with the controlled walk of someone who had done this twice before in 23 years and had hoped never to do it again. She was scanning. Her eyes moved row by row fast the way a searchlight moves over water. She was looking for someone. Ethan understood immediately what kind of someone. He had seen the type himself in countless cockpits and squadron rooms, middle-aged white. The right posture, the right watch, the small, confident set of the jaw that said, "I have done this before. Ask me." Claire was not searching for a person. She was searching for a template. She reached row 8. Her eyes touched Ethan for half a second. His hoodie was up. His chin was unshaven. His hands rested in his lap, one of them near a small, unopened bag of pretzels he had not bothered with. There was nothing on him that matched the template. She moved on. Ethan exhaled very slowly through his nose. He had seen that look his entire life. He had seen it at airport security at his daughter's school, during parent meetings at the bank, when he had tried to refinance the house. It was not hatred. Hatred would have been simpler. It was the smaller, quieter thing, the eye that slid off a person, because that person didn't fit the picture someone had already drawn in their head. The plane shuddered again. From 2 rows behind him came a thin, rising cry, a child waking up, frightened, not yet old enough to understand why. A woman's voice murmured to the child in a hush that was trying very hard not to tremble. Ethan heard the soft thud of a small plastic toy hitting the carpet. A green dinosaur. It skidded into the aisle and stopped against the leg of his seat. Inside the hoodie pocket, his fingers closed around the watch. The metal was cold. It was always cold no matter how long he carried it. He had stopped wondering why a long time ago. He thought of Lily. He thought of the constellation lamp and the pancake breakfast on Saturday, and the way she said "daddy" with 2 syllables that did not quite match because she was still learning to say it like a 3rd grader and not a 5-year-old. He thought of the promise. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He thought of the 194 other people in this cabin, every one of them holding their breath in the dark, and the fact that not one of them had stood up. He thought of what kind of father came home at the cost of a plane full of strangers, and what kind of father did not. His thumb pressed against the crown of the watch. Across the aisle, Diane Whitlock glanced at him. He felt the glance before he saw it. She had heard the captain. She had watched Claire walk past him. She had reached her own conclusion about what kind of man sat in seat 8A in a gray hoodie at 3 in the morning, and the conclusion was visible in the way her mouth tightened. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The click was small. In the held breath of the cabin, it was not small at all. Heads turned. Diane's eyes widened, then narrowed, and a short, audible scoff slipped out of her before she could stop it. "Of course," she muttered just loud enough for him to hear. "Some people sleep through anything." Ethan stood up. He did not look at her. He did not look at any of them. He looked toward the front of the aircraft where Claire Bennett had already half-turned at the sound of the buckle. Her face shifted through 3 expressions. In less than a second, surprise, calculation, doubt. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried in the silence the way trained voices do. "My name is Ethan Brooks. I was a fighter pilot. F-16s, 13 years, 2,100 hours. I can help." Claire did not answer right away. She was looking at his hoodie. She was looking at his hands. She was running the same template across him a second time and finding the same nothing. Behind Ethan, Diane Whitlock made another small sound. Not a laugh, not quite. The kind of sound a person makes when reality refuses to confirm what reality has already been told to be. From somewhere 2 rows back, the young mother whispered something to her child that Ethan could not hear. The green plastic dinosaur lay sideways in the aisle, forgotten. Claire took 1 step closer. Her voice came out lower than the captain's announcement had, but it carried the same hairline crack. "Sir, I'm going to need you to sit down." Ethan held her eyes. He did not sit down. "You don't have time," he said. For 1 full second, the only thing moving in the cabin was the small green tail of the plastic dinosaur rocking back and forth with the residual shake of the airframe. Then, somewhere ahead in the forward galley, the interphone began to ring. Short, sharp. The cockpit calling out for an answer. The cabin could no longer pretend it did not need. The watch in Ethan's pocket pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. He understood for the first time in 4 years that he was not going to be allowed to keep both his promises tonight. He had already decided which one he would break. The interphone rang twice before Claire Bennett reached it. She did not look at Ethan. She did not look at Diane Whitlock, who was still half turned in her seat with the small, frozen smile of a person who had said something out loud and was now waiting to be told she was right. Claire walked to the forward galley, picked up the receiver, and listened. Whatever she heard, the cabin saw it land in her face. For 3 full seconds, her expression did not move. Then she said very softly into the receiver, "Say that again, Captain." Then she said, "Stay with me, David. Stay with me." The cabin heard the name, David. It had not known the captain had a name. She hung the receiver. When she turned around, she was a different person than she had been 30 seconds earlier. The lead flight attendant was gone. What stood there in the galley was a woman who had just been told that the man in command of this airplane had said, "Claire, I can't see anymore." She came back down the aisle to row 8, and she looked at Ethan, and the look this time was different. It was not the template look. It was not even doubt exactly. It was the look of someone trying to do the right thing inside a building that had just caught fire. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "I want to believe you, but I cannot put a passenger I do not know into a cockpit because of 2,100 hours that I have no way to verify. That is not a rule I have the authority to break." Ethan kept his hands at his sides. "I understand. Do you have anything A license? A military ID? Anything?" "My pilot's license is in a drawer in Seattle. My DD-214 is in the same drawer." His voice was steady, but there was a tiredness underneath it that had nothing to do with the flight. "I left the Air Force 4 years ago. I don't carry anything that says what I used to be." A man in seat 12B leaned across to his wife just loud enough. "Is he serious?" Wearing that, Ethan heard it. He did not turn. He had heard 1,000 small versions of that sentence over the years, on different runways, in different rooms, from people who did not know they were saying anything at all. The exhaustion of hearing it now at 3 in the morning over the black Atlantic with a captain who could not see anymore settled on him like a coat that had grown too heavy to take off. Claire's mouth tightened. He could see her wanting to believe him. He could also see the 23 years of procedure standing behind her like a wall. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't." From across the aisle, Diane Whitlock let a small sound of vindication escape. She did not bother to hide it. It was at that moment that the man in 9C stood up. He was older, late 50s, gray hair cut short, a soft flannel shirt over a thermal undershirt that had seen a lot of winters. He moved the way men who had spent decades in uniform moved long after they were out of it, with a kind of square economy. He stepped into the aisle and looked at Claire. "Mom, my name is Frank Miller. I did 22 years Air Force Tactical Air Control. I worked with F-16 drivers from Lakenheath to Kunsen. Give me 2 minutes with this man. If he's lying, I will tell you. If he's not, you will hear it." Claire looked at him. Then she looked at Ethan. Then she looked at the forward galley where the interphone receiver still sat warm in its cradle. 2 minutes, she said. Frank turned to Ethan. He did not extend his hand. The two of them understood without saying it that the next 2 minutes were not going to be a conversation. They were going to be a test, conducted in front of every witness in the cabin, and one of them was going to fail it. "Unit," Frank said. 77th Fighter Squadron. Base of assignment: Shaw, then Aviano, then Bagram in 09. Wing commander at Aviano when you were there. Colonel Ridge. Call sign. The half-second that followed was so small that only Frank caught it. Ethan's chin did not move. His shoulders did not move. But somewhere behind his eyes, a door he had nailed shut 4 years earlier rattled once on its hinges. Reaper 2-1. Frank's expression did not change either, but he had heard the half-beat, and he understood it the way men who had sat in rooms with returning pilots understood it. He kept going. Hydraulic A loss on an F-16. First 3 things you do. Confirm the warning. Reduce flight control demand. Get to a divert field at maximum endurance airspeed. Stall speed clean configuration at 30,000. 140 knots indicated give or take depending on store loading. Last time you were in a cockpit. 4 years ago, the day I filed my separation. Frank turned very slowly to Claire. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He's the real thing, ma'am. I would put my life and the lives of every passenger on this aircraft on what I just heard. You don't get those answers from a movie. Claire looked at Ethan for what was, by his count, the 3rd time. The first time she had not seen him. The second time, she had measured him against a wall. This time, she actually looked, and what she saw was a man who had told the truth, twice in a row, in a cabin that did not want to hear it. "Come with me," she said. She turned and walked toward the cockpit door. Frank Miller stepped aside to let Ethan pass. As Ethan went by, Frank spoke quietly, just for him. "Reaper 2-1. Welcome back, brother." Ethan did not answer. He could not have if he had tried. The cockpit door opened, and the smell hit him first. A thin, sour edge of human distress underneath the recycled cabin air. Captain David Reynolds was slumped in the left seat, strapped upright by his harness, the right side of his face slack in a way that meant exactly what Ethan was afraid it meant. His chest moved. His eyes were open. The left arm hung against the side of the seat, like something that had been forgotten there. In the right seat sat First Officer Ryan Cooper, both hands wrapped around the yoke, his knuckles the color of dry bone. He did not turn when the door opened. "Ryan," Claire said. He did not turn. Ethan understood instantly. He had seen this once before in a flight surgeon's office, in a debrief he had not been the subject of. He had seen what it looked like when a pilot's brain decided that the only thing it was going to do for the next several minutes was keep the wings level, because if it tried to do anything else, the whole system would collapse. Ryan Cooper was not being stubborn. Ryan Cooper was frozen. Claire moved past Ethan into the cockpit and knelt by Reynolds. She worked the harness clasps with the practiced hands of a woman who had trained for exactly this moment and had hoped never to use the training. The captain's body sagged against her shoulder. She caught him. "I need a hand," she said quietly. Ethan crouched beside her. Together, they eased Reynolds out of the left seat and laid him along the rear bulkhead of the cockpit, his harness folded under his head as a pillow. The good eye tracked Ethan the whole way down, calm and clear, the way a man's eye stays calm when he understands exactly what is happening to him, and to the airplane he is no longer flying. Ethan slid into the left seat. He did not touch the yoke. He did not touch the throttle quadrant. He spoke at the volume of a man waking a child from a nightmare. "Ryan, my name is Ethan. You are flying this airplane just fine. I'm going to read for you. You are still the pilot of this aircraft. I am not going to take anything from you." Something happened in Ryan's shoulders. The first deep breath in what was almost certainly 4 minutes pushed out through his nose. "Okay," Ryan said. "Okay." Ethan looked at the panel. He had never flown a Boeing 777. He had logged exactly 0 hours in any transport category aircraft. But the principles were the same in every cockpit on Earth. And the most important principle was that you read what the airplane told you, and you did what the airplane asked. He keyed the radio. "Shannon Control. Shannon Control. Atlantic. 447. Heavy declaring an emergency. Captain incapacitated. Co-pilot at the controls. Requesting vectors for the nearest suitable runway priority handling." His thumb came off the transmit switch, and for half a second, the inside of his ear was not the cockpit of a Boeing. It was the inside of an F-16 helmet, and a voice he had not let himself hear for 4 years was saying, "Reaper 2-1 Mayday, Mayday." He blinked. The cockpit came back. Shannon was already answering calm and clipped, vectoring them toward an Irish coast. that was still 240 nautical miles away. He pushed the memory down where it lived. The first warning came 11 minutes later. A soft amber chime and a yellow line on the ECAM display that Ethan recognized by category, even if he had never seen it on this aircraft. Hydraulic system. 1 pressure dropping. Ryan made a sound that was not a word. This can't be happening at the same time as... It just did. Ethan's voice did not rise. We handle it the way the airplane tells us to. Your right hand. Center pedestal. ECAM actions. Read them to me. Ryan's right hand moved. It shook, but it moved. He read. Ethan listened. They did what the airplane asked. 4 minutes later, hydraulic system 2 began to lose pressure. Ryan's breathing changed. Ethan could hear it over the headset. The fast, shallow rhythm of a man whose body was telling him to run from a thing he could not run from. Ethan reached across the center console and placed his hand on Ryan's shoulder. He did not grip. He just put it there. Breathe. I am still here. Ryan breathed. Through the open interphone, Ethan said just loud enough for Claire to hear in the forward galley. Claire, start preparing the cabin. No details. Brace position when I call for it. Not before. Her voice came back even. Understood. He did not allow himself to think about Lily then. He allowed himself only the next item on the panel, and the next, and the next. In the cabin behind the cockpit door, Frank Miller had returned to his seat in 9C, but he had not buckled in. He sat at the aisle edge, watching every passenger Claire moved past, the way a sergeant watches a formation under fire. Across the aisle from Ethan's empty seat, Diane Whitlock was no longer half-turned with a small, frozen smile. She was staring straight ahead at the seatback in front of her, and her hands were folded so tightly in her lap that the knuckles had gone the same color as Ryan Cooper's. 2 rows back, the young mother had her son in her arms. The green plastic dinosaur was clutched in his small fist. She was whispering something into his hair that was not words exactly the kind of sound a person makes when they are trying to keep a promise to a child that the world has already started breaking. The third warning came 6 minutes after that. It was not a chime. It was the master caution in red, and the third hydraulic line on the ECAM died in front of them, in real-time pressure ticking down to 0, like a clock running out. Ryan made a sound that was almost a laugh, except there was nothing in it. We can't land this plane. Ethan did not answer right away. In the half-second between Ryan's sentence and his own, he was not in the cockpit anymore. He was 4 years younger. He was over a dry valley with the call sign, Reaper 2-1. He was hearing a voice in his ear, a voice he had loved, a voice that had trusted him, and he was making a decision that had cost that voice its life. And he was learning in the worst possible way that there were some decisions you did not get to take back. He came back into the cockpit. He looked at Ryan Cooper, 31 years old, holding a dying airplane in his white hands, waiting for someone to tell him whether he was about to die, and he said the only true thing he had left. We can land this airplane, not because we are good, because we do not have another choice. He was not sure even as he said it whether he was talking to Ryan or to himself 4 years ago, or to the voice in the helmet that had said Mayday, and then said nothing else. Shannon's voice came through the headset, calm and grave. Atlantic, 447. Heavy be advised, gusts at Shannon, currently 41 knots crossing the runway. Heavy rain on the field. We have crash fire and rescue rolling for your arrival. Ryan made another small sound. Ethan keyed the cabin interphone. Claire, now. Not prepare. Brace position. Now. Her voice came over the cabin. A heartbeat later, steady, almost gentle the way a mother sounds when she is lying to a child for the child's own good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your lead flight attendant. I need you to assume the brace position. Head down. Feet flat. Hold on tightly. Stay in that position until you hear me say otherwise. Outside the windscreen, the Atlantic was still black. But somewhere ahead of them, under the cloud deck, an Irish runway was waiting in the rain. And behind the cockpit door, the people in the cabin were folding themselves forward into their own laps in the dark. In row 8, seat A was empty. In row 7, seat C, Diane Whitlock bent forward over her knees. The small, confident smile she had worn for most of her adult life was gone from her face entirely. What replaced it was something she would not have been able to name even to herself if anyone had asked. 2 rows back, the young mother folded her body around her son. The green plastic dinosaur was pressed between her chest and his small back. She did not let go of him. In 9, C, Frank Miller bent forward into the brace position and closed his eyes and said something under his breath that no one heard. It was not a prayer exactly. It was the name of a man he had worked with in Kunsan a long time ago, a fighter pilot whose call sign he had not said out loud in 20 years. In the cockpit, Captain David Reynolds lay along the rear bulkhead where Ethan had laid him. His good eye had found Ethan and was holding him. The right corner of Reynolds' mouth moved slow and uncertain around a word he could not quite make. Ethan saw the word form and saw it not finish and saw it try again. He nodded back at the captain. He did not need the word. "I've got it, sir," he said. "Rest." Reynolds' eye closed. Ethan put both hands on the panel in front of him. Not on the yoke. He still had not touched the yoke. That belonged to Ryan, and he intended for it to keep belonging to Ryan no matter what happened in the next 9 minutes. The watch in his hoodie pocket pressed against his ribs. He did not look at it. He did not need to. He already knew what time it was. Through the windscreen, the first thin glow of approach lighting began to bloom in the rain. A faint string of pale lights laid across the black, the only thing in the entire world that was telling them where to go. Ryan inhaled. Ethan said, in the voice he had once used in a different cockpit, on a different night, to a different pilot, who had not lived through what came next. "Okay, Ryan. Your airplane, my voice. Let's bring it down." Ryan's hands tightened on the yoke, and the Boeing began its descent into Shannon, into the rain, into the gusts crossing the runway at 41 knots, into the last 9 minutes of every life on board. The cloud deck broke open at 3,000 feet. Beneath them in the gray pre-dawn rain, the Shannon runway appeared a long, wet ribbon laid across the green Irish coast, edged in pale approach, lighting that ran into the cloud like a thread someone had dropped from above. The crosswind hit the airframe at the same moment the runway lights resolved into individual points, and the Boeing yawed to the right by 1.5 degrees, then 1 degree more. Ryan Cooper made a small sound. Not a word, just a release of breath. "Wind correction," Ethan said. 5 degrees left rudder. Hold it. Ryan held it. The two of them had become a single instrument over the last 9 minutes. Ethan read airspeed, altitude, descent rate, the lateral drift of the heading bug. Ryan flew the airplane. Neither of them had time to wonder whether what they were doing was working, because wondering about it would have stopped them from doing it. At 1,000 feet, Shannon's tower came through the radio in the same clipped voice that had given them their vectors. Atlantic, 447, heavy runway, 24. Wind 270 at 41, gusting 46. You are cleared to land. Emergency equipment standing by. Ryan's lips formed the words cleared to land without sound. 800 feet. The Boeing was bleeding airspeed faster than the descent rate wanted it to. Ethan called the trend before the trend became a problem, Ryan corrected. The plane settled. 500 feet. The pale lights resolved into runway threshold markers, a green flash of incursion lighting, the faint dark shapes of fire trucks pulled to the side, their roof beacons spinning red and yellow through the rain. 200 feet. Ryan flared. He flared a heartbeat too early. Ethan saw it happen, the small, upward pressure of Ryan's wrists, the instinct of a body that wanted to be light, that wanted not to hit. The nose came up. The airplane lost the last of the lift it had been borrowing from forward speed. For 1 full second, the 777 hung over the runway, like a thing that had forgotten its own weight. Then it dropped. "Let it down," Ethan said. "Don't pull. Let it down." The first impact came through the airframe as a deep, flat thud, and the Boeing bounced once 12 feet 15, no one would ever know. And Ryan's hands went white on the yoke, and Ethan said again, low and steady into the headset, "Let it down, don't pull," and Ryan let it down. The second impact was not flat. It was violent. Something in the rear cabin came loose and hit the bulkhead. A cry rose from somewhere behind row 20, short, sharp, then gone. The overhead bins in row 4 popped open and emptied themselves into the aisle. The Boeing slammed onto the wet asphalt of runway 24 with all the grace of a falling weight, and then it began to skid. The brakes were almost nothing. Without hydraulic pressure, what they had was the rolling friction of 3 landing gear assemblies on a runway with half an inch of standing water on it, and the airplane wanted to weathercock left into the wind. Ryan stomped on the right rudder pedal with everything he had. Ethan pushed his own the matching pedal on the left side. The controls were tandem, the cable the same, and gave it the rest of his weight. The Boeing kept drifting left. Then it stopped drifting left. Then slowly it began to track straight. The end of the runway came up out of the rain concrete overrun, then grass, then a line of red runway end lights that meant this is where the runway stops being a runway. The lights got closer. Then they got slower. Ethan said not to Ryan, not to Shannon Control, not to anyone in the cabin, but to the airframe itself very softly. "Stay with us." The Boeing stopped. The red lights at the end of the runway were 80 meters in front of the nose. The rain ran down the windscreen in long, uneven sheets. The engines spooled themselves back to idle on their own, the way engines do when a pilot has forgotten to bring them down because the pilot is no longer thinking about engines. For 3 seconds, no one in the cockpit breathed. Then very slowly, Ryan Cooper began to shake. It was not the shake of a man who had been scared. It was the shake of a body remembering after the fact what it had been keeping itself together against. His shoulders moved first, then his hands. The hands were still on the yoke. Ethan reached across the center console and laid his right hand over Ryan's left on the yoke. He did not pry. He just rested his hand there. "You can let go now," he said. Ryan let go. He did not cry out loud. He cried the way men cry when they have been told their whole lives not to, small, short breaths, no sound, the shoulders doing all the work. Ethan kept his hand on the yoke a second longer, then lifted it and put it back in his lap. "Your airplane," he said. Ryan turned for the first time since Ethan had walked into the cockpit and looked at him. His eyes were red. His mouth was open like a man who had a great deal to say and no idea how to begin saying it. "Radio Shannon," Ethan said gently. "Tell them we're down. Tell them what we need." Ryan's hand reached for the radio switch. It shook. He keyed it. "Shannon Tower, Atlantic 447 Heavy. We are down. We are on the runway. We need medical and full evacuation." Shannon's voice came back, no longer clipped, relieved the way a controller's voice gets when an airplane that should not have made it has made it. "Atlantic 447 Heavy copy. Equipment is rolling to you. Welcome to Shannon." Behind the cockpit door in the dark cabin, the brace position broke into 100 small, upright motions all at once. Claire Bennett was on her feet before the airplane had finished rocking on its struts. She stood in the forward galley aisle with both hands raised, and her voice came out steady and louder than anyone had heard a flight attendant's voice in a very long time. "Stay in your seats. Stay in your positions until I tell you otherwise. Help is coming." Her eyes were wet. Her voice was not. From 2 rows behind the empty seat, 8A, the child began to cry. It was not the rising, frightened cry from before. It was the loose, loud bawling of a small boy who had just figured out that he was alive, and that crying was something alive people were allowed to do. His mother folded forward over him, kissed the top of his head 3 times in a row, and made a sound that was halfway between laughter and a sob. The green plastic dinosaur had slid out of his hand on the second impact and was lying 2 rows up the aisle near row 7. Frank Miller, already unbuckled, leaned out into the aisle. He picked the dinosaur up. He walked the 2 rows back without hurrying, without making any kind of speech of it, and he handed the dinosaur to the boy. "I think this belongs to you, son." The boy took it. He could not say thank you yet. He could only press the dinosaur into the front of his mother's coat and grip it. The mother, her name was Hannah Mercer, and her son was Caleb, looked up at Frank with a face that was completely undone. Frank patted her shoulder once and moved on down the aisle to help the elderly woman in row 11 who could not get her seatbelt unlatched. In seat 7, C. Diane Whitlock had not moved. She was still bent forward in the brace position, even though Claire had not told them to come out of it. Her forehead was almost touching her knees. She was crying without any sound at all, and she did not lift her head because she did not want anyone in the cabin to see her face yet. In the cockpit, the medical team came through the door, and Ethan stepped back from the captain to let them work. Reynolds's good eye opened. It found him. The right corner of Reynolds's mouth tried again to make a word. This time, Ethan watched the lips form it all the way through. "Thank you." The word did not have any sound behind it, but it did not need any. Ethan inclined his head. He reached down and rested his hand very briefly on the captain's good shoulder. The forward door opened with a long pneumatic sigh, and the emergency slide bloomed out into the gray Irish morning. Claire ran the evacuation the way she had probably rehearsed in her head once a month for 23 years. She called rows. She caught small children at the top of the slide and sent them down to the firefighters waiting at the bottom. She was not crying anymore. Crying was for later. Ethan stood at the back of the forward galley just behind her and counted. It was a reflex he did not remember choosing. The pilot was always the last off the airplane. His body did not know how to stop knowing that. He counted to 193. The man from 12B, the one who had asked his wife, "Is he serious?" Wearing that, went down the slide and did not look at Ethan as he passed, because his face was not something he could carry past anyone right now. Diane Whitlock came up the aisle last of the passengers. She had wiped her face. She had put on the small, composed expression that 25 years of boardrooms had given her, and underneath it, her hands were shaking in a way the small, composed expression could not hide. When she reached the forward galley, she stopped. She looked at Ethan. What came out of her mouth was not what she had practiced in her head on the walk up the aisle. "I'm sorry." 3 words. Quiet. No board, no firm, no situ in the world that would have heard her use that order of words in that voice. Ethan held her eyes. He did not make her work for what she said next, because there was nothing she could have said next that would have been bigger than the 3 words she had already managed. "Go," he said. "Mind the slide. It's steep." She went. Claire turned to him then, and for the first time since the cabin had gone, still hours before she really looked at him. Not as a passenger, not as a problem, not as a pilot whose template she had failed to match. She looked at him as a person who had walked into a room she had not known how to be in and had stayed in it with her until the room let them out. "Go," she said. "I'll be last." Ethan shook his head once. "No, ma'am. You go first. I'll go after you." She did not argue. She went down the slide. Ethan went last. The slide gave under him, and the rain hit his face, and his feet found the wet tarmac of Shannon Airport at 6:17 in the morning Irish time. He walked 30 meters from the airplane the way evacuation procedure required. Then he turned around and looked at it. The Boeing sat tilted on the wet runway in the gray light, one wing slightly lower than the other, steam still rising off the brakes, the long, pale skid tracks behind it, stretching back into the rain. It looked more than anything else like a large, tired animal that had just finished doing the impossible and was now allowed finally to stand still. His phone buzzed in the hoodie pocket. He had not realized he had signal until just then. He took the phone out with a hand that he discovered was shaking, not from the cold, although it was cold, and not from adrenaline, although there was plenty of that. His hand was shaking, the way hands shake when the body has finally noticed it is allowed to. The screen said, Helen Parker. He stood in the rain at Shannon, and he looked at his neighbor's name on the screen of his phone, and the only thought in his head was she would not be calling unless Lily had asked her to. He answered, Helen. The voice on the other end of the line was tired and surprised and warm and 8 hours behind him in Seattle. Ethan. Oh, thank God. There was something on the news just now. Your airline I didn't want to call. But Lily woke up, she said her stomach hurt, and I put her on. A small shuffling. A blanket. A breath he would have recognized in any country in the world. Daddy. He closed his eyes. The rain came down on his face. I'm here, baby. I'm here. The terminal at Shannon had cleared one corner of the International Arrivals Hall to make room for them. Blue blankets, hot drinks in paper cups, a small folding table where 2 airline representatives in damp coats were writing down names with the slow shock of people who had not been on the airplane but had spent the last 40 minutes thinking they were going to lose it. 2 journalists had already arrived. Someone had leaked the call sign and the words, "Passenger assisted landing," and now there were microphones and a small handheld camera and the soft, urgent voices of people who had a deadline and did not yet know what they had a deadline for. A microphone appeared in front of Ethan before he had even sat down. Sir, the people on your flight are saying you helped land it. Do you have any words for the public? Ethan looked at the microphone. Then he looked past it at Frank, at Claire, at Ryan with the medic. Ask them, he said. I need to talk to my daughter. He moved past the microphone and sat at the far end of a row of plastic chairs. The blue blanket was around his shoulders. He opened the video call. Lily's face filled the screen, hair messy. Old stuffed rabbit pressed against her cheek. The constellation lamp glowing soft behind her shoulder, the way he had hung it for her when she was 4. Daddy, did you eat breakfast? The most ordinary question in the world. The only one he could have answered. He laughed and he cried, and the 2 of them happened at the same time, the way they sometimes did when he was very, very tired. Not yet, baby. I'm going to eat right now. Are you coming home on time? I'm coming home on time. She did not ask him anything else. She did not need to. He was on the screen. He was talking. That was the whole report for an 8-year-old who had been promised a Saturday pancake breakfast. She tilted her head. Daddy, your hands are shaking. Ethan looked down. His left hand was in his lap holding the steel watch. He had taken it out of the hoodie pocket without remembering doing it. The leather of the band was dark with the oil of his fingers from 4 years of carrying it. He had not yet noticed. I'm okay, baby. I just remembered something I'd forgotten for a long time. What did you forget, Natty? He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the watch in his hand. He looked at his daughter's face in the screen. I forgot I'm still your dad, he said, no matter what I do. Lily considered this with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned that some sentences were too big to be considered seriously. Then she nodded. Okay, Daddy. Okay, baby. Eat breakfast. I will. He held the phone there a second longer than he needed to. Then he kissed his fingertips and pressed them very gently to the screen. On the other side of the world, in a constellation-lit bedroom in Seattle, his daughter did the same thing back. The call ended. Behind him, 2 rows down, Frank Miller had stood up and walked the 8 steps to the microphone Ethan had left. The handheld camera turned toward him. Frank did not smile. He did not perform. "I'll say one thing, and then I'm done. The man who just walked away from your camera sat in seat 8A for 2 hours before he stood up." The flight attendant walked past him twice. "I want you to think about that." Frank walked back to his chair and picked his tea up off the floor. Hannah Mercer came up behind the camera before the journalist could turn it back to herself. Caleb was on her hip. The boy still had the green plastic dinosaur in his fist. "He doesn't need to be praised," Hannah said. "He needs to be seen the first time, not the last." She walked past the camera too. By 8 in the morning, the arrivals hall had begun to thin. Ethan sat by the long terminal window with the blue blanket folded over the chair beside him. The watch was in his palm. Outside the window, the eastern sky over Ireland had begun to turn a thin, pale gold. The rain had stopped at some point in the last hour. He had not noticed when. He turned the crown of the watch between his thumb and forefinger. 8 quiet clicks. The second hand began to move. He thought for a moment that he allowed himself fully of the call sign that had been silent for 4 years, of a voice in his ear that had trusted him, of the decision he had made, and the decision he had not been able to take back. He thought of the 4 years he had spent making sure he would never be in that kind of position again. And he thought of the 9 minutes earlier this morning when he had been in exactly that kind of position and had not run from it. He fastened the watch around his wrist. It was the first time it had touched his skin in 4 years. He pulled the cuff of the hoodie back down over it, not to hide it, just because that was where his sleeves usually were. The man he had been 4 years ago and the man he was now were not two different people. They never had been. He had only been carrying one of them in his pocket, like a thing that did not deserve to be worn. He understood now, sitting by a window in Shannon with the eastern sky turning gold, with his daughter 8 hours behind him, and a flight home not yet booked, that bravery had never been the absence of fear. Bravery was love-bearing weight under pressure. It was the thing that made a man stand up out of seat 8A when a flight attendant had already walked past him twice. It was the thing that kept a 31-year-old first officer's hand on a yoke he was no longer sure could land a plane. It was an old sergeant picking a plastic dinosaur up off a cabin floor and walking it 2 rows back without making a speech of it. It was 3 words, "I am sorry," in a woman's voice that had not used those words in that order in 25 years. It was the most ordinary question in the world, asked late in the evening in a constellation-lit bedroom in Seattle by a small girl who had woken up with a stomachache she could not explain. "Daddy, did you eat breakfast?" Ethan Brooks rested his hand on the wrist where the watch now lived and looked out at the slow gold light coming up over Ireland and waited for the next flight home.